screen starts glowing, and the film starts rolling. You wanna be knowing what you might be in for. So give the show a listen and find out what you're missing. Put yourself in position for the is a good score.
We are the goods. We are a podcast. We are gonna talk about a song, a documentary. Hey everyone, welcome to the 164th episode of The Goods. I'm joined by Brian. How you doing, Brian?
Hey Dan, glad to be invited on the album.
And also we're joined by Brian's brother, Andrew, who we were able to rope in kind of on a whim and kind of in the spirit of a supergroup recording. Because I think Andrew would be a key piece of our supergroup if we were trying to make a good supergroup.
Right, I almost thought we needed to bring everybody in who's ever appeared. That would be the big spoiler, like the big surprise.
Did you try to get literally everybody back?
I wish that I had the foresight to do that. Get Gavin in here doing a solo verse. Will can play the Michael Jackson role, maybe. I don't know. I would have to go through all the people, Gargus and Hunter and Nate and probably a couple others that I apologize if I missed you and you've been on the pod.
And then Jason Koulis in the surprise, like the Ray Charles role.
Harry Belafonte in the background.
Comes in superimposed over everybody.
But I am doing well. It's good to be back. I think this is my first non-birthday movie episode. Correct me if I'm wrong. But it kind of feels like a birthday movie in some ways, which we'll get into later.
It's got some of the energy. I think that's fair, for sure.
Yeah.
And to remind people, Andrew works at Disney. I signed on to the Zoom call, and they were talking Disney gossip, like how they're changing the rides and stuff. So how is life treating you down in Orlando?
It's starting to get hot again. It's been very busy because it's been spring break. So busiest time of the year behind Christmas time.
And we're recording this on a Tuesday, and you just explained to me that Tuesday is your Sunday because your weekend is Monday and Tuesday. Those are the days you have off.
Yes, same with my girlfriend. We line that up well. Nobody wants Monday and Tuesday off, so it's easy to line things up. So, yep.
And thank you for joining.
And for people who keep track of the calendar, we just had a total eclipse of the sun yesterday, at least in some parts of the contiguous United States.
No Bonnie Tyler in this, so we couldn't do a total eclipse of the heart, total eclipse of the sun joke here. So what we're going to talk about in this episode is through the lens of a documentary entitled The Greatest Night in Pop. And this is a documentary about the preparation, recording, and release of the 1985 single by the supergroup USA for Africa, I think it's called. And their song is called We Are the World. And it hit #1 on the Billboard charts, sold 1 trillion copies, won some Grammys. And it's just an utterly fascinating relic of pop culture to me for reasons I'm going to elaborate upon. So this is kind of like we're talking about the documentary, but also just like the concept of the song and everything and the characters and the energy. And just, I find it so deeply fascinating and amusing. And I'll talk about that in a second. But Brian, before I kind of explain why I'm so drawn to this song, any preliminary thoughts?
Sure, a couple things. I've got some bullet points down at the bottom of our document that'll be things I sprinkle in. One, though, is why I had to bring Andrew aboard for this episode, because he is my go-to We Are the World expert. A person who really seems to have a connection to that song and larger media event. Mostly, he has the sweatshirt. USA for Africa sweatshirt that they gave out as swag at this get-together. But where does it go beyond that, Andrew? What is your connection to We Are the World?
All right. Well, first off, I don't want to be accused of stolen valor. My sweater is a reproduction.
Not authentic.
Yeah.
You didn't rob Bob Dylan's house or anything like that. Break through Kenny Rogers' window.
Yeah. But we did do an episode of something different about all kinds of charity songs. Not that there's that many. We definitely shysted in quite a few. But we did talk about We Are the World in quite depth, but this documentary wasn't out yet. And I mean, it just came out this year. I wasn't even aware that it existed. And Isaiah and I, my co-hosts, are just big fans of anything Stevie and Bruce are in. But beyond that, I didn't have too much true knowledge aside from my sweatshirt.
So this was an illuminating experience for you.
Absolutely. I was very excited when y'all introduced me to it.
Andrew's radio episode might have actually been what opened my eyes to We Are the World. I'm not sure I had heard the song before that. I had definitely heard the Christmas one, Do They Know It's Christmas?
Which I didn't know was first.
Yeah, let's talk about Do They Know It's Christmas? Because that's kind of the blueprint, the prototype.
It's a good starting point. And actually, I had heard that one on the radio for years, and until they covered it for our friend Olivia Walsh's Christmas album in 2010, I didn't understand that the gimmick was it was a bunch of different voices. I just assumed it was a regular-sized band singing the song, because I was just hearing it, not seeing it. So I thought it was like 4 or 5 people in a band.
So the English music, when I say English, I mean from England, entertainment industry has a strong tradition of charity as like kind of this performative thing that they do pretty regularly. There's something called Red Nose Day that gets a lot of play over there, where I think it's once every year they basically have, I don't quite know exactly what it is, but it has to do with all these entertainers basically doing charity. So it's like kind of I would say a bigger part of the entertainment culture in England than it is in the US. And so they pioneered this kind of, it's supergroup is even too weak a word. It's like an ultra group. And I don't know if you're ever going to have a bigger one than We Are the World, USA for Africa. But the one that England did is kind of setting the stage. Was the supergroup, the mega group was called Band-Aid. And the song they released was called Do They Know It's Christmas? And it's all English performers. It was done the Christmas before We Are the World. So it was winter 1984. And this is when there was a big famine going on in Ethiopia, in Africa. There's a Wikipedia page for it, the 1983 to 1985 famine in Ethiopia. And it's just utterly horrifying thing that happened. And honestly, you know, there's always scary stuff going on in poor parts of the world. But when you read about this one, I find it particularly harrowing. And so the idea is that, hey, if you get all these famous people to basically just donate their time, record something, a lot of people will pay to listen to it. And then all that money goes straight to charity, goes straight to giving food to people in Africa. And this song, Do They Know It's Christmas? You still hear it on the radio quite a bit. I would say you hear it more on the radio than We Are the World by far, because it's a Christmas song. And a lot of people listen to old music around Christmas, the same, 75 songs year in, year out. And this is one of those 75. And some of the people involved with this song, which, by the way, if you've ever listened to Christmas radio, you've surely heard it's, do they know it's Christmas time at all? Do, 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 do.
The only bells that ring there are the clanging chimes of doom.
And this is where I need to talk about some of my fundamental beliefs regarding this kind of music. And so if you ever spent much time in my household when I was a kid, we had this kind of just view on stuff that I don't quite know how to describe, but I call it quasi-irony these days. And so here's what I mean. It's where we choose something, and it could be anything. It could be a song. It could be like a line that we repeat over and over again. It could be a TV show, could be anything. And we like embrace it wholeheartedly, but also like ironically, like we're making fun of the idea sort of, but we're also like really into it. And that's how I feel about songs like this, is that it's kind of objectively gnarly and just not very good to listen to, but it's so like big and gaudy and engaging that like, okay, I'm kind of into it, but I also like celebrate it for its cheesiness. Like there's an element of irony to it. And particularly when it's like, I think there's something kind of complicated about this kind of performative charity where it's almost as much about, hey, look at me. I'm the one going out there. I'm this big shot. I'm the one who can pull in all this money and do this grand noble thing of giving it to the poor people in Africa. It's like a bit of self-worship as much as it is an act of charity. On the other hand, like the large majority of the people who are doing these things, they're just famous singers. They're like, okay, this is a thing I can do to help. I want to do something nice. So there's kind of two sides to it that I find fascinating, because it's just this sort of mash of all these ideas into this one thing. So I don't know. What do you think, Andrew or Brian?
I feel like the culture has kind of changed in several ways. But like if you look at when COVID was going full steam, and who were the celebrities who put out that video where they're like, we can stay at home together, and
Gal Gadot.
Yeah, and they're on their
She's
yachts and their private islands or whatever. Yeah, exactly. And there was backlash to that. Like, oh, this is performative. This is nonsense. You're not really contributing to the world.
Two things happened around the late 80s that I think fundamentally shifted the culture, at least the music culture, in a way that would prevent this from ever happening on this scale with the level of this icons ever again. Although I think there's actually some reasons that you could do something like this even better today than you could in the past, but nothing would be quite as zeitgeisty. And the two things that changed it, one was punk rock and two was hip hop. And in both of those things, the vision of like what was cool and like who you wanted to be, like who was the icon, totally shifted. Like punk rock was just like making fun of everything. And it's like kind of, you know, the Simpsons, leading up to the Simpsons culture where you're irreverent about everything. And I just don't think that like this, something like this could ever be cool enough that everybody cared about it ever again in the post-punk era. And hip hop has something to do with it too, because that was a time when, you know, different kinds of voices and a new kind of like stardom and like way of building an image that was just totally fundamentally different. I don't want to necessarily get into like my whole theory on hip hop here, but I just think that you couldn't do something quite like this ever again is kind of what I'm saying. At least not quite so big as this. And that's why I think 1985 was like the absolute perfect time to do songs like these, and why it's just something really unique and special. One last thought on why 1984, 1985 was so important. So this is about 30 years after the birth of rock and roll, what people started being able to buy records and bring them into their house, and everybody had a record player in their house when Billboard became charts. And it's about 20 years after Beatlemania when like that became like the big thing in American culture and English culture. And so how long ago is that? 20 years before, 30 years before. So these people were still alive. So the people that you could have in here are like founding fathers of the art form of pop and rock music that we have is today. The 3-minute pop single, you know, like the LP that we still use to release music, you know, even though we do it on streaming now, we still think of music in these units and in the same approximate mold of, hey, here's a rock star. Like the notion of what a rock star is has changed, but like the people who birthed these ideas were still around, and we get some of them in these videos. It's pretty cool.
Well, a couple things about that. So 1984 is when our parents got married, Andrew's and mine. And sometimes when they talk about pop culture that was in vogue right when they got married, I guess the Ethiopian famine isn't pop culture, but they've definitely mentioned it, that it was in the headlines. And also Amadeus. That's the other thing. Amadeus was big, 1984.
Great movie.
I saw that was your most recent viewed thing on Netflix. Did you watch it because of that reason?
Yes. I'm about halfway through. It's a long movie. And I've seen it so many times, but I really love it. So I'm watching it in dribs and drabs in between other things. But yes, inspired by the movie. The other thing is on the topic of could it be done again? And Andrew knows it has been done again. Can you tell us just very briefly, and then maybe we'll return to it, about We Are the World 25, Andrew?
Yes, so that was in 2010, I believe, even though it would make sense for it to be in, it says 2010. Should have been in 2009 if the first one was 1984, but...
No, the Christmas one was 84. We Are the World was 85.
Okay, thank you. But yeah, it was done for Haiti. Michael had just died. Lionel was still part of it. Michael still gets a very big part of the song, the same part that he got originally. But it was for a magnitude 7 earthquake in Haiti, which killed thousands of people. And yeah, it was a lot different song, that is. Dan was talking about how there have been shifts with hip hop and punk rock. Can't say there was a lot of punk rock in the new version, but there was definitely hip hop. There's a whole rap breakdown. Hard to say. I don't think it compared in terms of stardom to the first version, but Justin was in it.
The Biebs.
Yeah.
Oh,
Other than that, I mean, there are a lot of big names. I'm belittling it quite a bit.
Who else? Wyclef Jean.
Josh Groban. Yeah, Wyclef Jean was I think he organized some of it. Nick Jonas, Lil Wayne, Akon.
Apple D-App.
Oh, Kanye was in it. Adam Levine, Pink, Usher, Celine Dion. So, I mean, Barbra Streisand, Tony Bennett.
Awkward collar pull on Kanye West being in that one now.
So, kind of the same spirit. Crazy to think that was already almost another 15 years ago, because I think this documentary, I guess it's been 39 years, but I feel like they're getting it out to kind of cash in on coming up on the 40th anniversary.
But do you think it's time that they do another one?
Maybe for 50, right?
I think, Andrew, you're a few years younger than both Brian and me, and I'm even a couple years older than Brian, so the gap between you and me is even bigger. And when you were talking about pop stars and you said, oh, and Justin's in it, my mind went straight to Justin Timberlake.
Oh.
And yours went to Justin Bieber. So I think that's like a half of a generation gap there. It's like the difference between an older millennial and a younger millennial.
8 years between you and me, I think.
It might be 9 years.
Oh.
Are you Zillennial? What are you, Andrew?
January 1997.
So what generation is that?
I don't know where that puts me.
I'm going to look it up.
After the millennials, I would say.
It's like right on the cusp.
Okay, according to Wikipedia, oh man, you just made the cut. Gen Z starts January 1st, 1997. So you're in. You're out of the millennial clubs. You're in with the Zoomers.
You get to still be young. I really like Wikipedia. That sounds like somebody who would write a book of the Bible.
That's how they pronounce it in an episode of Community, and it's stuck with me. So I guess I'll toss in here why I think you might be able to do something that had like the approximate same star power, but just wouldn't have quite the same cultural zeitgeist as 1985. But that is basically, now you have, we talked about this in the last episode, which you haven't heard yet, Andrew, but we talked about the concept of poptimism. I mean, mainly I talked about the concept of poptimism a little bit, and how there's like this whole movement of like pop being this kind of movement where you lift other artists up, and there's like this kind of positivity to it. And I feel like you could get like Taylor Swift, Selena Gomez, you could get Ed Sheeran, you could get like all of the people who are topping the charts in a room together, because everybody's buds now. Like everybody's rah, rah, way to go, Taylor. Yeah, you set the record. That's awesome. Like cheering each other on. So I feel like there is energy for that. It wouldn't be the same. You cannot recreate the magic of the split screen between Stevie Wonder and Bruce Springsteen. It's just impossible. There's no two people alive now, or I guess performing now, since they're still both alive. That's not quite right. But performing now who could recreate that.
And Andrew, after watching this, I would guess it's Bruce Springsteen who sings the cover of Frosty the Snowman on the radio, right?
You mean Santa Claus is coming to town?
That's it.
Yeah.
Yes. The one where he gets all out of breath.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I botched the anecdote, but yes, that's the one I was thinking of.
That's essentially my only Bruce exposure, so yes.
It's like, oh, it's that guy. The guy who just, like, falls apart singing Santa Claus coming to town.
Other than in Isaiah's old house where the entire basement was covered with Bruce Springsteen pictures because he's from New Jersey. Bruce, I guess, is like a god to all the New Jersey moms.
He is ridiculously handsome in this documentary. Like 1985 Bruce Springsteen. If you go to the Letterboxd page and like look at the most popular reviews, a solid half of them are people talking about how handsome Bruce Springsteen was in 1985. Just to close the loop on Band-Aid and the Do They Know It's Christmas, some of the people they had in there, they had Kool and the Gang, they had Phil Collins from Genesis.
Duran Duran was in it.
Yeah, U2. They also had George Michael. So last year, a documentary came out called Wham! I think it's on Netflix. And I watched this, and it's about George Michael's duo before he became a solo artist. And one of the things he talked about in that is how he also released a Christmas song that year. And that is Last Christmas, which is another one you still hear on the radio. Last Christmas, I gave you my heart, and the very next day you gave it away. And how he was kind of mad that that was the year that they chose to do a supergroup song, because he really wanted to get the number one Christmas song. Apparently in England, it's a big deal, whichever song is number one on Christmas. And
that's a major plot line of
Love Actually.
Love Actually.
Yeah. And George Michael thought he was going to get it with his song, but then Band-Aid came together and recorded that at the last minute. And he talks about how that made him mad, which I thought was really funny. And I wanted more of that in the documentary that we had to talk about tonight, because we'll talk about it, but it's too nice, this documentary. But the best part of the Band-Aid song is when Bono, so U2's in there too, when Bono has this line that he just belts out like at 110%. Well, tonight, thank God it's them instead of you. Which I think what he means is like, aren't you lucky that you have food to eat? What a blessing for you. But what it sounds like is, I'm glad I'm not the one starving. I'm glad it's those suckers over in Africa. It's just the funniest, doofiest line. And I always laugh out loud when I hear him sing that line. Thank God tonight it's them instead of you.
I just like all the doomsaying in the lyrics of the only water flowing is the bitter sting of tears. Pretty metal lyrics. And in fact, that one got some reskin, some censored, cleaned up lyrics in the recent years.
I was gonna say, I believe both of those lines were replaced in the new version.
Oh, really?
Like the whole first verse is essentially changed in the new version.
So that's some general supergroup thoughts and Band-Aid. Any other supergroup things you wanted to shout out before we moved on to the topic of the evening?
Just that there's been some good parodies of the form as well. You mentioned The Simpsons. There was a Simpsons episode where the various celebrities do a tribute song called Sending Our Love Down the Well. And Krusty the Clown gets the Bruce Springsteen part, with like extra attention paid to animating his lips and teeth as he's doing his all the way down.
I haven't seen that episode in so long, but I do remember that. That's a good one.
And of course, Weird Al has one called Don't Download This Song from the Napster era. Andrew and Isaiah called their radio episode Songs for a Cause, so it's in that spirit.
Very nice. But you guys mentioned, you asked how you brought it up. So one kind of side effect of the lyrics, we are the world, we are the children, we are the ones who make a better place, so let's start giving.
I believe it's make a brighter day. And then later it's better day. And that's a hang-up point in the documentary. Do we say brighter both times, or do we change it?
You couldn't design in the lab better lyrics or like a simpler melody for elementary school kids to sing in a performance for their parents like the last week of school, which I definitely did one year. I didn't know anything about the history of the song, but I had heard, that was how I first heard the song, is they made us sing it in school one time. And then one summer I went to a camp that was broken into singers, artists, and something else. And at like the big final gala, all of the people in the music portion of the camp, which is what I was in, we sang "We Are the World" for everyone there. And I was kind of embarrassed by it because I was right at the age where I was starting to realize that how goddamn corny it was.
I would have to interject and say that "It's a Small World" is maybe a contender for being above that, and it has the exact same message.
That's a good point.
So,
it's a small world after all. Yeah, and it's got a melody that's memorable too. So I think maybe 1A and 1B, we'll say.
Now I want to see little robots of all the singers in this song. I want to see a Lionel Richie robot.
So the way that I'm thinking that we'll structure this is we'll go through the documentary does kind of a good job of putting it all together. We'll talk about the documentary, sprinkle in our thoughts as we go. And then at the end, we'll talk about just anything we might have missed, the music video itself. And then after we're all done, we'll give a good rating to both the documentary and the We Are the World music video. So, greatest night in pop, documentary from this year. The format of this documentary is it's a mix of archival footage with interviews taken recently of people who were involved in the making of it. And it's not everyone. I actually wish it was more people. It's something like 10 or 15 people they get interviews from. There's Huey Lewis, Cyndi Lauper, and it opens with Lionel Richie. So Lionel Richie is an extremely important figure in this song coming together, as we'll learn. But to me, Lionel Richie is like not the best pop star from the mid 80s, but like the most mid 80s pop star in like the way that he is kind of corny, in the way that I think of mid 80s culture being kind of corny.
Yeah. He's got this wholesomeness. He is like if Mr. Rogers was a pop star. I'm not completely familiar with his corpus, but all of his songs are like feel good, party spirit. Anyone of any race can listen to this. It's got Dancing on the Ceiling. It's got All Night Long.
I mean, to quote J-Rock from the Trailer Park Boys, Lionel Richie pretty much isn't even black after the Commodores.
Yeah, he's totally sanded down. I don't know if he's quite as wholesome as Mr. Rogers, but he's very much like a 4-quadrant guy. It's like there's nothing offensive about him.
He's like Carlton Banks.
Yeah. And as this documentary comes along, it becomes clear that Lionel Richie has what I would call school president energy, where like everybody likes him and he also knows everybody and he like brings people in and he manages to like kind of keep things moving forward, but also like not be pushy about it. And so he has like a kind of likable, but also almost fake personality about him, like that he pleases everybody, you know? And he's kind of our main narrator. And I will say that I think part of the reason this documentary ends up being so nice, it's so positive about the experience with like no acknowledgement that this might somehow be kind of cheesy other than a few throwaways or that there was like any friction involved really. I think it's because Lionel Richie was a producer on the documentary and like he values We Are the World as part of his legacy as like this great achievement, this great thing we did, and doesn't want it to be like an object of ridicule or scorn at all. So it's like all positive about what this was, I guess.
I also got the feeling that he must have been the one who had all this footage like in a locker.
Yeah. That's my guess as well. I haven't seen anything to confirm that, but that it just feels like it because he was the organizer and he's the first narrator and he's the producer. So one of the first things that Lionel Richie says is that basically in the wake of Band-Aid and how successful that was, how much money it raised, he was talking to Harry Belafonte. So Harry Belafonte is an immensely important musician, as are many of the people here. He was American and he was black. He died actually just last year he died. He was like 96 or something when he died last year. So he was already in 1985 sort of like an elder statesman. And he was kind of one of the first pop musicians who had aged into like this sort of advocate for social change, like this political figure almost, in a way that's a little more normal and understood now. But like here he's kind of like ascended beyond what most of the other pop stars are here, because he had kind of embraced that role. And one thing that was really important to Belafonte is, all right, like generally people in Africa are black. America has a great tradition of black musicians. Like this should be led by black artists. And so they kind of built that idea that this was going to be like black voices for black people in Africa. So the first person that they pulled in, Belafonte didn't really want to like do any of the nitty gritty. He was just kind of like the guy who had the idea and was like, we got to go do this. We should go do this. And so Lionel Richie ran with it. And the other person they pulled in is another one of the key figures. And this is Quincy Jones. So Quincy Jones, you may or may not know by name, but he is one of the most influential producers in rock and roll history. He produced so many Motown records and Michael Jackson and just some of the greatest pop music of the 60s and 70s and 80s that you'd ever hear. And he also, if Lionel Richie has like school president energy, Quincy Jones has like school vice president energy, where he's not the one who's, razzle dazzling everyone, but he's always there too, always getting stuff done. Not the right hand man. He's kind of like almost a partner of Lionel Richie, but he's like the kind of quieter, respected, keep the wheels turning type of guy. And they both come across as like pretty competent and likable, but they're like kind of the two driving figures of this song. And the first person that they tried to get to write the song with them was Stevie Wonder. And so, Andrew, you said you like Stevie Wonder. So tell me your relationship with Stevie Wonder.
Not as much as you might think. Mostly from this.
Okay.
I'm a fan of just the blind black 80s singers. More so Stevie Wonder than Ray Charles, but they both crack me up a little bit. And I really like I Just Called to Say I Love You. It's a very good song. Mentions pretty much all the holidays. I'm a fake fan. That might be it, actually.
Does he sing the one, Someday at Christmas?
Yes.
Yes, he does.
Okay, that's a good song, too.
I get the impression that I'm like more into pop music in general than you guys are. I hope you don't take offense at me saying that.
It's accurate. I mean, we just had 2 pop music episodes in a row, and the last episode I said the sign of whether I like a musician is if the radio is on and I hear them, I don't turn it off. And that holds true here.
Before I got into writing and podcasting more about movies, I actually did a lot more on music than on movies. And yeah, I mean, Stevie Wonder is one of the greatest of all time. He had this run from like 1972 to 1980 where he made like 8 of the greatest albums of all time. Intervisions, Songs in the Key of Life, Fulliness, First Finale. Just some of these albums are all-time bangers. So he, to me, is like, he's probably in my top 10 or 15 musicians of all time. He's terrific. But he's also like eccentric, not to generalize too much, but like the blind musicians, I just think of as being eccentric. Like they live in their own universe, sort of.
I feel like from what I've seen of Stevie Wonder, he really leans into the leaning. Like he's always rocking back and forth.
Oh yeah,
Brian just imitated this. We don't have it on visual recording.
I would say you're potentially more into music in general, not just pop music, than either of us. If you can name 8 Stevie Wonder albums. Is that fair, Brian?
I think so.
It's not a competition here. We're here for
I know.
to make the world a better place. So let's start giving. So Stevie Wonder said he would call him back, never called him back. And so then who else could they get to co-write the song? And so Quincy, he's Michael Jackson's producer, and Michael Jackson's the biggest star in the world, arguably the biggest pop star of all time in 1985. Thriller just came out about a year ago. And so he's like, all right, Michael Jackson, we have this idea. Do you want to co-write it? And he said, yes, I do. So awesome. You have Michael Jackson, all-time great singer, performer, songwriter, and he's going to be in your core team as well. Obviously a problematic figure now, but you know, he was on top of the world in 1985. And so I assume you guys are a little more familiar with Michael Jackson than maybe some of these others. What are some Michael Jackson songs you know?
Thriller.
Yeah, I love Thriller. There's a lot of Michael Jackson songs that I know. Yeah, I mean, things that get radio play even still today. There was a moment of time where there was waffling. Oh, are we still going to play it on the radio? And everybody seems to have decided, yes, we're still going to play it on the radio. But Man in the Mirror.
Just think of the Weird Al parodies and you'll come up with them.
Oh, right.
Oh, yeah, Bad.
Beat It and Bad. There's some others.
Yeah, he had a stretch too where he made this album Off the Wall in 1979. Okay, I guess Thriller was 82. For some reason I thought it was 84, but it was 82. And then he made Bad in 1987. And those three albums are all 5 stars for sure. And Thriller is like still the best-selling album of all time on some metrics.
And he had that song Ghost, right? Or Ghosts, Andrew? You had it on your radio show.
Oh, yes, it was in one of the Halloween episodes, I think. Yeah, he certainly did. I don't know if that was one of his top sellers.
He did vocals on Somebody's Watching Me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Did the music uncredited for Sonic the Hedgehog 3.
Wait, really?
He might be the most successful Halloween singer.
Yeah, he just blew Bobby Boris Pickett out of the water.
And speaking of The Simpsons, pretty early in the run, Michael Jackson became a big fan and he agreed to appear so long as he wasn't credited. And so there's an episode where Homer goes to an insane asylum and meets a white guy who claims to be Michael Jackson. And he's actually voiced by Michael Jackson. It's pretty great.
But that one's not on streaming.
Oh, did they take it down because of Michael Jackson?
They did.
Gotcha.
I don't know that it was ever up because Disney bought it and then launched in 2019.
Wasn't there some contractual stuff that he couldn't sing if he was credited or something like that?
It's something like that. Like they don't actually say that it's him in the episode,
right?
But it is him.
And so there's one bit that comes up a couple times throughout it, and just the charm of this documentary is in the anecdotes. And I wish it was more anecdotes and just little snippets. But one is when they talk about any of the songwriting sessions between Lionel Richie and Michael Jackson, always something funny involving animals. And so one is this first songwriting session they talk about. So first of all, Michael Jackson calls Lionel Richie Lionel. He doesn't say it Lionel. He says Lionel.
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 And
hold my monkey.
And
I want you to check out Bubbles the Chimp. I said, no, I don't want to check out the chimp.
And just all the exotic animals they have and how they were recording and they heard a noise downstairs and it was like, what was it? Was it a dog and a bird arguing with each other or something like that? Pretty funny. So as they're kind of writing this, and you can tell they're kind of procrastinating. They're like, oh, we'll write it at some point. But
I love that part of the story that, okay, you have 10 days to write this thing, that then everybody in the world is going to come and sing, and then everybody in the whole world is going to listen to a week later than that, and they're procrastinating. So it's good to know that everybody does that.
Well, at first they don't know any of that, actually. They don't know when they're going to record it. They don't know who's going to be there. They hope it's going to be big, of course, but behind the scenes, some of the people who they had kind of pulled in to help organize the logistics of it, they even got Bob Geldof, the guy who organized Band-Aid, to start to help out with this. And they're like, all right, well, you know what? If we're going to get the biggest pop stars, we can start getting white artists too, not just black artists. So they get Kenny Rogers, they get Kim Carnes. And as they were doing this, they're like, well, how could we possibly get the schedules of 50 big stars to line up? And then someone has the bright idea. hey, what if we do it after the American Music Awards? Everyone will be in town because the American Music Awards is a big deal. You know, instead of going to an after party, they'll just come straight to the recording studio and we'll record the song with everyone who's in town for the American Music Awards. Great idea. Also, just so happens that Lionel Richie was hosting those American Music Awards. I don't think that's why they chose that, but he just happened to be. And among the people they wanted to get in, the biggest get, the one that they really wanted, was Prince. So another reason that 1985 was a special time in music was Prince and Michael Jackson were like two sides of the pop star coin, and each kind of had their own unique qualities about what made them massive and influential. And so they also had this rivalry bit where like each of them was trying to one up the other. Prince had just had, within the past couple of years, I think When Doves Cry was his big one. And they were both huge, massive stars. He was in Purple Rain? Is that the movie and album? Have you seen that movie, Brian?
I haven't, but that's definitely the title.
Okay. So they kept trying to get him in, and this whole saga with Prince is actually kind of a fascinating undercurrent to this whole story, because it's not clear how much he ever actually said yes, he would do it, but he did kind of string them along that he didn't outright say no. So even up until recording night, there was tension about whether Prince was going to show up. Some of the other big gets they have Steve Perry from Journey, Cyndi Lauper, and the Cyndi Lauper one I thought was pretty interesting because one of the producers said, we can't have both Cyndi Lauper and Madonna. I don't know why somebody made that decision. You have every single like white soft rock singer there. Why can you have all of them, but only one of Cyndi Lauper and Madonna? Get both of them. And for whatever reason, they decided Cyndi Lauper, probably because she's a little more musical than Madonna. And I don't know, Madonna always had complicated reputation. So maybe they were worried about that.
They had two Kennys. They had Kenny Loggins and Kenny Rogers.
If you can have two Kennys, you can have Cyndi Lauper and Madonna. I mentioned Steve Perry of Journey. Do you guys have any strong Journey feelings? Don't Stop Believin'.
Don't Stop Believin', pretty good song.
Yeah.
10 out of 10 track.
Just that literal video from
Oh,
whatever that song is called.
Is that Separate Ways?
Yeah. Great song.
Okay. Yeah, I like that one too.
Yeah.
And Brian, I'm impressed you took what Andrew just did and were able to turn that into recognizing a song.
I mean, that's what most of the song is.
Well, yeah, he showed that to me when he was in college. Because there was some channel that did literal lyrics that was like describing what was happening in the music video. Yeah.
I got a big kick out of those. It's one of those things that now I look back and I'm like, that's not very funny. But for whatever reason, I really liked it for a window in time.
So at this point, most of the artists they had recruited were pop musicians. And they were like, well, hold on, can we get like rock musicians? And so the first person they called was Bruce Springsteen. And he agreed to come, which kind of opened the universe of like, oh, well, Bruce Springsteen is coming, so maybe you could come too. Because he was, first of all, he had released, I think it was that year, he had released Born in the USA. Yeah, because he had said he was on tour for that in the documentary, which is, again, a 5-star album. So Bruce Springsteen, we talked a little bit about him a minute ago. He is one of my two favorite musicians of all time. In fact, both of my favorite musicians of all time, Bruce Springsteen and Billy Joel, were at this recording. Bruce Springsteen has kind of been my favorite basically since I graduated college, and Billy Joel was kind of more formative on me. But he is just a phenomenal writer, songwriter too, lyrics and music. And he's just kind of got this classical vision of America and like all of the weird contradictions and social undercurrents of America that I just find very profound and compelling. And I know we're not here just to talk about all my favorite musicians that made it here, but that one is very particularly meaningful for me. And I think he's got a big presence in it, which is part of what I like about it.
He's like Mr. Blue Collar. I love the story that he drove up in his own car. Everybody else was showing up in like limousines.
Yeah.
And he just climbs out of this beat up car.
Oh, and it's also poignant because, he's blue collar, but he's also got the soul of a poet. He's kind of like the heir to Bob Dylan, which is relevant because Bob Dylan was the next person they called after Bruce Springsteen to get Bob Dylan there. And boy, do I have Bob Dylan thoughts in this documentary.
Oh, us too. Andrew, I think in the episode pointed out that he said, keep an eye on Bob Dylan when you watch this video. Because he just looks so uncomfortable. And also just like he's on a different wavelength.
Let's hold our Bob Dylan thoughts for a second, just to wrap up my Bruce Springsteen thoughts here. So yeah, he's got the soul of a poet. And one of his central images is he always talks about cars. And so him driving up in a car is just very on the nose almost. It's very good.
I mean, what else would you drive up in?
Well, like being brought there in a limo or something like that. Like him driving his own car. It's like him taking his own destiny in some ways.
That makes sense. But when they're rattling off all the people that they're going to invite, there's a lot of little like montages in this documentary. And so this one, they're saying, well, if so-and-so's going to come, then we should ask Madonna. And if Kenny Rogers is going to come, we should ask Kenny Loggins, and all this A to B to C. And then somebody says, and so then I thought, let's get Dan Aykroyd. And that just goes by in a bleep, like really fast. It's like, wait a minute, what? Why did you think that?
You got some questions here.
Sure enough, there he is in the group. But like, is Dan Aykroyd a singer?
I know that he knows how to sing. He was like a driver on. Isn't he one of the Blues Brothers, or am I getting him mixed up with someone else?
Oh, maybe he is. Because isn't one of them a Belushi, and then is he the other one?
Yeah, so it is Dan Aykroyd. So he was the guy. He like really loved 50s music. And so Blues Brothers, in addition to being one of his bits in Saturday Night Live, was like something he was really passionate about. So I think he's kind of a music head, but he's not a musician, and he stands out. He looks like Dwight from The Office in there. They talked about some people they couldn't get, like they wanted Van Halen to come, and they wanted David Byrne from Talking Heads to come, and couldn't get all of them. And I feel like there was one or two other really big names. It was like, oh, it would have been so cool if they could have gotten them, that they kind of toss out there, that they just didn't happen to not be in town. But so now they have all these people, they have a date set, and now we get another one of the songwriting sessions. They're like, wait, we're recording this in like 8 days and we don't have a song yet. So they talk about another songwriting session. And this has one of my favorite anecdotes of the documentary, where they're sitting there writing the song, coming up with the lyrics, and all of a sudden a snake pulls up to, like a huge python just pulls up to like, what would you say? What is the slithers up to Lionel Richie, and Michael Jackson's like, oh, there it is. I lost my python in the house. He just lost his python and then it popped out while they're in the middle of writing We Are the World. I don't know. There's also something emblematic about that, like just the sheer excess wealth that you can lose a python in a mansion. Like that's crazy rich, crazy people stuff.
Lionel Richie paints a really good picture of interacting with Michael Jackson.
Yeah. And so the place they booked is this studio called A&M Studios. It's in LA near the American Music Awards. And this is where we start to get the really cool video footage. And I imagine some of it is like recreated for the documentary, but I couldn't always tell what was archival and what was recreated. But there's some really cool stuff of like them prepping the studio and some of the logistics. One thing they talk about is they have like these index cards that they like pre-arranged where people were going to stand with each other so that like you'd have the different types of singers together and all sorts of stuff like that. And then they recorded a demo, I think on a cassette, and they sent it out to all the musicians who were going to be there so that they could hear the song, learn the song. I mean, it's a very simple song. Actually, why don't we talk about the song? Not the singers, but the song. So it's like a stupid simple song. It's like a mid-tempo ballad with like a one line that gets repeated over and over again for 7 minutes, and there's like one bridge in there. But I liked what Bruce said. He was very diplomatic about it. He said it was broad, but that's what you need for a song like this where everybody's going to be singing. And I think there's truth in that. You need a simple, annoyingly earwormy, basic song that everybody can sing, with that you can belt out the chorus over and over and over again.
To me, it sounds almost like a Christmas song. It makes sense that it was inspired by a Christmas song. Also, I think it pretty shamelessly pilfers part of the melody from Do You Hear What I Hear? The part that goes, a star, dancing in the night. A choice we're making, we're da-da-da-da-da. It's like it's the same on the keyboard.
I can hear that. Interesting, yeah.
Do you have highlights, lowlights on these lyrics, Dan?
Oh, God. I can never remember what the lyrics are. They're like that kind of generic.
How many lyrics changed during the recording?
Yeah, some of them changed. We're going to get to some of that. We're about to get to the really good part of this documentary. I honestly think like the first half of the documentary almost, or maybe it's like between a third and a half is the setup. Just cut that part off and give me just more. Like Lionel Richie has this monologue at the beginning where he's like, well, we brought everyone together and it was only going to happen one night and it was crazy. Like that's all you need for setup. And then you could just, the rest could just be the footage of the thing. And I feel like that would be something I'd be more likely to rewatch just because it's when they're in the studio that's the best part, but we're about to get there.
It really is crazy that it's one night and they just shepherd everybody in there after an awards show. So it's already late. It's like 10 p.m. when they walk in the door. And Lionel Richie was the host of the awards show where he sang 2 songs and like received 6 awards, which I feel like generally they pick awards hosts who aren't going to win 6 awards. Like you wouldn't see that happen at the Oscars, at least not these days.
I agree with that. And Brian, you had asked highlights and lowlights on lyrics, and I had paused on that while I thought about it because, to be quite honest, I haven't really thought too much about the lyrics of this. The lyrics are really not that important to me on this, but one that always catches my ear is, and God has shown us by turning stones to bread. I wish we had Gavin on because I want to know, is that actually a biblical story? Like I know the loaves and I know the manna from the sky, but when Jesus had the loaves that multiplied, but is there actual stone to bread? Is that a Bible story?
So the stones to bread is in there somewhere because I just re-listened to the podcast about the Munster siege. And it comes up in that discussion.
Okay. So not a Bible story per se, but a formative Christian event. Okay.
Well, I mean, I assumed that they were talking about it during the siege because they were all religious fanatics, and I'm guessing it's in there in scripture somewhere.
According to MIT.edu, somewhere in Matthew 4, the tempter came to him and said, if you are the Son of God, tell these stones to become bread.
Jesus answered, it is written. I always, that's a great response. It is written. And then you quote something. It's like I'm about to drop some bars on you.
That's an OP response.
Man does not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God. What about you, Brian? Any highlights or lowlights on the lyrics?
That would probably be my pick too. And Willie Nelson gets to say that part.
It looks like he's in pain while he's doing it, but most of the male singers did.
That was the style at the time. So I feel like some of the key components of the chorus changed. What we were talking brighter day versus better day. So it looks like we are the ones who make a brighter day. So let's start giving. But then later it's true. We'll make a better day. Just you and me.
Right. So it's always brighter and then better.
Gotcha.
And there's a lot of repetition. So easy to learn all the words. Part of the prep for this episode was Dan sent me a podcast episode where it's a different podcast deep diving into We Are the World. And they pointed out that everybody in this music video is looking at the sheet music, looking at the words.
It's just what you do when you what do you do with your hands otherwise? You got music in front of you, may as well look at it. But you're right. It's like it's about 15 total words, and if you can't remember the 15 total words, you hear it one time and you know what it is. You know, you don't need the music, but yeah, that is funny. So now one interesting thing is apparently at one point Michael Jackson had said he was only going to write it. He wasn't going to perform, but then he decided he was going to perform. And so when he decided he was going to perform as part of it, he just left the AMAs and he like went there like 3 hours early. And we have footage of him like practicing, like working out some of the lines. And it's funny because you can tell when he's doing it that either he doesn't know it or like they were still in the process of finalizing the lyrics because he sings it a little differently. And at one point he starts adding by turning stone to bread in the chorus. And you hear Quincy say, Michael, can you sing it without that line? And I just like the idea of people trying to insert their own changes to the song is a very funny recurring thread throughout this documentary. People trying to introduce their own touches to it.
Another thing was, at some point it was written, there's a chance we're taking our own lives. They revised that to, there's a choice we're making, we're saving our own lives, which I think is a little more upbeat.
That would have been up there with "Thank God Tonight It's Them Instead of You." One anecdote they mention is like, at the night of the AMAs, Lionel crossed paths with Cyndi Lauper, and she said, "No, I'm not going to come. My boyfriend listened to the demo and thinks it's not going to be a hit." And Lionel's like, "Don't be an idiot. You got to come to this thing." But just the idea that Cyndi Lauper played it for her boyfriend. I don't know who her boyfriend was. I like to imagine it's just some random guy. It probably was someone famous because she was that famous, but
Yeah, some Pony Sugru guy. I aspire to be like a celebrity boyfriend who gets to shoot down something that I have no business or connection to.
Even if that meant dating Cyndi Lauper?
Yeah, I mean, she sang the Pee-wee's Playhouse theme song. I'm on board with Cyndi
I forgot
Lauper.
about that. Yeah. No, I like Cyndi Lauper, but
yeah, she rules. So one of the kind of most famous takeaways from We Are the World is the phrase, "check your ego at the door." So supposedly Quincy Jones just came up with this on the spot and wrote it on a piece of paper. And you can actually see they had take a picture of it and hung it on the doorway where you walk into the recording studio. He just wrote, "check your ego at the door." Because, of course, you're having so many huge pop stars who think that they're hot shit. You need people who are willing to just kind of be a part of a bigger whole. And I think that's a good turn of phrase. Brian, when we start recording a podcast, I have to remind myself, check your ego at the door.
Yeah, we've got little Post-it notes that say that on our desks. But what this whole movie made me think of is the 24-speed filmmaking competition that I do each year.
I have that in my notes.
And obviously, it's different levels of stardom, but a lot in this movie made me think of it, including that Michael Jackson is over there early. Like, he's the one, like, organizing everything before everybody else is going to come.
Trying out the mics and stuff. By the way, when Michael Jackson is there and we get footage of him just singing by himself, it's like surreal how beautiful his voice is. He's just got like an all-time great voice. But anyways, 24 speed. Anything else to add to that?
Yeah, the idea that, well, everybody's going to show up in the evening, and that's when you start. And then it's going to go all night long. And even at 6 a.m., you're going to be doing stuff. It's putting this thing together. And the way that they have all the documentary footage of this actually happening. Everybody in the room really doing the thing. And then you have the finished product that is the aftermath, the music video.
The last couple people, everybody else has gone home, and the last couple people sleep deprived, throwing it together, yeah. One thing in here is like when everybody's arriving, nobody knew who was going to be there. It was like a state secret who and where. And Paul Simon of Simon and Garfunkel, also a great performing artist in his own right, sees everyone there and says, "Whoa, if a bomb lands on this place, John Denver is back on top." Which makes me think that there's like this beef between Paul Simon and John Denver, who are like the two most innocent looking white dudes. What's the beef story between Paul Simon and John Denver?
That was my biggest laugh of the movie. I like John Denver.
Yeah.
I guess maybe his star had waned a little bit by 1985, but yeah, like that they, or at least Paul Simon points to him as like the hokey, oh, he's not cool enough to be here guy. It's like he did pretty well. I mean, John Denver had some big songs.
Yeah.
Who do you think is the biggest missing presence? I guess they talk about Prince, they talk about a few people, but who would you most want there at this window in time who's not there, Dan?
Who would I want? I mean, I think Prince is undeniably like the top. And I think looking back now, Madonna not being there is just weird. I feel like Madonna should have been there. I don't know. I need to think about who were some of the other biggest pop stars. Was there anyone who came to mind for you?
I think Weird Al Yankovic should have been there.
When did he release his first album?
1983.
Gotcha.
And there were living Beatles.
But everybody here is American.
Well, there still are.
Another one that came up somewhere I was reading, it might have been that podcast that Brian mentioned, is Whitney Houston wasn't there. And like Whitney Houston was like 1 year away or 2 years away from ascending to, being one of the top 3 or 4 stars in the planet.
I will say I've watched this movie twice, this documentary. Some of the people I still don't know who they are. I don't know who Kim Carnes is. What is Kim Carnes' significance?
So she was just a singer-songwriter. She is not someone who has endured with the same popularity as a lot of the other artists here, but she was someone who was pretty big at the time, I think. I don't know who quite the comp would be where it would kind of make sense. Someone, I think it was that podcast, made the comparison of like Carly Rae Jepsen nowadays. Although I think she's now had a bigger career, so that's not appropriate anymore. But someone who's had like 3 songs, but like not really a career out of it. Or not really like a really long, enduring career.
Her distinctive, raspy vocal style has drawn comparisons to Rod Stewart, if that means anything to you.
Oh, Rod Stewart would have been so good in this too, but he's not. Is he American?
British.
I don't think he's
a
American.
sir.
Well, there you go. So they started the recording. Once everybody arrived, they started the recording session with Bob Geldof, basically, the guy who pioneered the idea back in England, giving the speech on like the importance of this, raising money for people in Ethiopia. And he does have they played this speech in the documentary, and there's a weird line he has in there. He says, "The cost of life is a 7-inch piece of plastic," which sounds really dark. I think what he's saying is like, we can make something that's a piece of plastic that will then fund life in Africa. But saying the cost of life is a 7-inch piece of plastic is almost like an existentialist phrase. Like we are reducing ourselves into this song and everything about our image into this. I don't know. I just thought that was kind of interesting. And so the first part of the recording night is singing the chorus. So the way it's structured, everybody sings the chorus. The people who are only there for the chorus leave, and then they sing the solos. And during the chorus, this is where we start to get some of the good Bob Dylan stuff. So I kind of cut you off, Brian. So give us a little bit of the Bob Dylan experience during this documentary, which you get snippets of in the music video, but you really get in the documentary.
Well, how would you explain or describe the face that Bob is making during the chorus part, Andrew?
Like completely catatonic. I mean, I feel like he was a little more active in the scenes you see in the documentary.
Yeah, he looks like at most concerned.
Yeah.
He seems like they let him out of a nursing home or something. Like he doesn't know where he is.
To me, he looks like he's constantly thinking, I've made a huge mistake.
Yeah.
I should not have come to this.
And he's clearly not singing also. It's like he's like
muttering.
mouthing something. Yeah, muttering, exactly.
Yeah.
And like looking around side to side.
But he also has a really weird voice. So like, do you think he's still doing that just with limited facial movement?
I'm not really sure. I'm not sure what he's contributing to the chorus, but I like the way that they eventually get him into it as described in the film.
We'll get to his solo, which is one of the best parts of the documentary. But I imagine he was like kind of mumbling is what if I like, we wanted to make a better place, but like he knew he didn't want to like, he can't really sing in a chorus. That's not his style. So like, he's kind of trying to participate, but also doesn't really know how to. It's, I heard people say, watching him is like how I feel when I'm doing a group project in college. Like everybody's smarter than me and knows what they're doing, and I'm just kind of there because I have to be there.
But this actually, Andrew, was another thing that made me think of 24 Speed, because one of the years, Paul Kay, who has gotten several name drops on the show, like, so I think I went upstairs to like shave or something, get ready, put on my costume, and I came back and they were all token up.
I remember this.
Like they were just all smoking marijuana. And then they had to act. And Paul had some line that started the film. And he had like a panic attack trying to say the line.
I remember this. I remember he said, "I'm not going to lie, I'm really high right now," when he was trying to recite the line.
He's like, I can't do it. Like, well, what if we do it just more simply? Can you say this way? And that's what I felt watching Bob Dylan in this evening unfolding.
It's pretty funny. And to me, it's even funnier because you like have a close up on Bob Dylan and he's like completely slack jawed and just like he's just been punched in the face and is like dazed and doesn't even know where he is. And then it like smash cuts to like Stevie Wonder and Tina Turner, who are like all expressive and like leaning on each other and thumbs up in and singing gregariously. And it's very, very funny. And one thing they mentioned I wanted more details on is, it's like I said, this documentary is too nice. They said, someone says it was getting pretty ripe in there. So like the idea that it was starting to smell bad. I was wondering, did any like one person smell particularly bad or anything like that? It's also during this that we see the shirts, like the one that Andrew had. I think I need to get one of these shirts. I want one of these We Are the World shirts because they're very 80s. They're like white with this kind of cheesy logo that you would design in word art. What else do you want to say about the shirts?
I mean, yeah, definitely looks like sweaters I saw in my dad's closet, our dad's closet, back in the day that he wore for a long time.
Yeah, how did you get yours?
I don't even remember. I thought Brian gave it to me like he gave me a Crystal Pepsi sweatshirt.
Oh, maybe Isaiah gave it to you.
You're probably right. But yeah, it was probably just off of like Redbubble or whatever site, just prints sweaters. Unfortunately, I need to get me a authentic one, but
it says USA for Africa on it. And at one point, Andrew was wearing it in the cover image on his Facebook account. And Dan commented, said, "Is that a USA for Africa sweatshirt?" So that was like a germ of an idea that is bearing fruit today.
Led to today, that's right.
I guess that was probably Christmas of 2019.
Yep.
Took that picture.
So at this point in the documentary, we're kind of right in the heart of it. And this is when we start to get some of my favorite bits. First of all, just Lionel Richie and Quincy Jones. It's a delight watching them as the dream team making things happen. And during the recording of the chorus, we get some of our first instances that Lionel and Quincy kind of have to quash down of people suggesting changes to the song. And if the year 2024 ends with any other movie scene being my favorite scene of the year, I would be astonished. And this is the moment when Stevie Wonder... So remember, Stevie Wonder was offered to write the song, and he just didn't call him back. So it's already on him. Stevie, you had your chance, you lost it. You can't come in and say you got to write the song differently now. There's a whole bunch of people here. We can't just do this on the spot. But he's kind of introducing this concept of rewriting it, and he says, no, what we should do is we should sing it in Swahili. We should sing it in Swahili. And the lyrics would be, Yule Mwangu Ayatoto. And remember, okay, it's probably half black, half white singers. And you have like Cyndi Lauper and Kenny Rogers looking at each other like, Ule Mwangu Ayatoto, I'm going to sing that for like everyone here. That wasn't on the demo. I'm just going to look horrible. Why would I be singing this? And it's so funny. The best is Waylon Jennings. So Waylon Jennings is kind of like a classic tough guy Western figure. He just like hears them. He's like, all right, I'm out. I'm not doing this if we're singing Swahili. He straight up walks out of the room. They can see him get up and walk out of the room, grab his stuff. I'm out.
No good old boy ever sing Swahili.
That's right. He says that. And people are just looking at him like, what's going on here? It's like, is it starting to fall apart? And then Stevie Wonder is trying to convince people. And he's like going from person to person, trying to get them to say, Yule Mwango Ayatoto. And like none of them are like, they're trying to do it. And it sounds terrible when anyone other than Stevie Wonder, and even with Stevie Wonder saying it's a little iffy. And just him going through it. And then someone butts in, and it's Bob Geldof. I learned when I rewatched this.
Well, he's the one who's been there.
Yeah,
been to
exactly.
Ethiopia.
He busts in, he's like, guys, Stevie, they don't speak Swahili in Ethiopia, which would have been the funniest unforced error of all time if that had somehow made it into the song. They had done this tribute to Ethiopia in Swahili. So everybody's like, oh, okay.
They speak Amharic in Ethiopia.
Interesting. Anyways, so good.
Also, their Haitian or Creole did make it into the 20 whatever version, the new one.
The 25 year or whatever it is.
Yep.
So then it builds from there because Michael Jackson, who, he's known for throwing nonsense words into his songs. Shemon, he's like, well, okay, I kind of get the idea of like trying to make it sound ethnic, make it sound cultural. And so he says we should sing Shala Shalalingay in the middle of the song. Brian, you were quoting this to me throughout the week. I was like, what is Brian talking about? I'd forgotten about this bit in there.
Yeah, so I've had this melody in my head all week, and I don't know how long it's going to last past this week, but I've been hearing it with Shala, Shala, Shalinge. But is it Smokey Robinson who calls him out on that? It's like,
yeah.
What does that mean, Michael? We're not doing that.
I love Smokey Robinson. I'm sad he didn't get a solo. He's got a very distinct voice. He would have made a great soloist, but he's also like someone who he was kind of an early Motown singer, and like from 15, 20 years earlier, and it would have been cool to have him in there too. But
I'm really surprised Harry Belafonte doesn't have a solo line. If he was like the mover and the shaker, the original prime mover.
Well, I think it makes more sense if you think of him as like an emeritus type. He shows up for singing the chorus, but he's not there as primarily as a musician. He's there as like a diplomat, a figure, as much as a musician. But there is this great moment right after they record most of the chorus where they shout out Harry Belafonte for basically kicking this thing off, like getting this idea rolling. And they break out into a chorus of everybody singing one of Harry Belafonte's most famous songs, Deo, which you might know from Beetlejuice, or you might just know because it's a standard. Daylight come and me wanna go home. And it sounds incredible because you have 50 of the greatest singers of the past half century here. And you also have Bob Dylan looking like an alien, like he just doesn't know what's happening around him again, which is very funny during this. And then we kind of get to the solo stuff, and we just get little vignettes. One is Ray Charles playing We Are the World, like improv gospel piano. I want his whole version of him just playing it on piano. And we get another one that's Lionel Richie. Apparently he insisted they ordered waffles and chicken and waffles for dinner. So you get shots of people eating chicken and waffles, and somebody talks about how Lionel Richie eats all the meat off of the bones, and he like sucks it in with his mouth. And the fact that they got into this is like one of the only things that felt a little bit like a dig in the documentary, making fun of Lionel Richie eating his chicken.
That character was interesting. I do like that we get to hear from the recording engineer, who's this guy named Umberto, and also the camera guys who got hired. They're like gig film student workers, basically. Hey, you know how to run a camera, so show up at A&M Studios on January 28th. Okay, I'll run a camera. And then every celebrity is there.
Yeah. Another bit that we see is Diana Ross goes up to Daryl Hall from Hall & Oates and asks for his signature on her music, which, like, if you're going to do random bingo on, like, who were the two people who were going to kick off signing each other's things, Diana Ross going up to Daryl Hall. Like, no offense to Daryl Hall, but, like, you got Stevie Wonder there. I mean, I guess Stevie Wonder, does he do signatures? I don't know. You got, like, Michael Jackson there. Why is she walking up to Daryl Hall and saying, can I get your signature on there? I don't know.
I didn't even notice that. That's really funny.
But then they all go around and, like, start signing each other's things.
What I thought was hilarious was that, so Simon is there singing a line as a solo. No Garfunkel. Hall is there singing a line. And Oates is there, but only in the chorus. He doesn't get a solo line.
So I think it's possible. I'm going to look this up now. I thought I remember reading. So no Garfunkel there at all. Is that right?
I don't think so. I didn't see him on the list.
Where's the list?
I feel like his hair would stand out if he was there.
Yeah, you're right. I don't see him here. Oh, I'm just looking at this now. I pulled up the list on Wikipedia. All of the Jacksons were there. Is Janet Jackson there? No, Janet Jackson, but the Jackson 5 are there. You got Randy and Tito. Oh, and apparently Waylon Jennings did get some recording in there. But anyways, yeah, so that if I were to get like one memento I think t-shirts. I think one of the shirts is still at the top, but like one of the signed music sheets would be up there as well. So one thing I mentioned a while ago is we have this Prince kind of thing still lurking. Is Prince going to show up? And apparently he was at the club and they kept calling him at the club and like, Prince, you going to come? You got to come, Prince. And he said, I'll come if you let me play a guitar solo by myself with no one else in the room. And I was like, well, no, that's not what we're doing, Prince. Like, we're all singing and we're all doing it together. And he's like, oh, right. And I've heard mentioned multiple times, but I didn't see it in the documentary and I didn't see it in an article I read. But apparently Bob Geldof got on the phone with Prince and they got into an argument. And that was when Prince said, I'm just not coming. It was after Bob Geldof yelled at him. So I don't know. But I thought that was interesting. They cut that out. This is another. I wanted to learn more about the meanness to each other because they talk a lot about how, it was getting late. People were getting grumpy. It was hot. Nobody was in a good mood. But then everybody's just nice to each other throughout the whole thing. So I wanted more of that nastiness.
I was impressed how quickly they were able to, like, it does seem that they were being somewhat efficient. You know, it like a lot of stuff will happen in the documentary and then it'll show the clock. And it will have been like 20 minutes went by.
Yeah, and then you'd get like a 3-hour gap. It went from like 1 a.m. to 4 a.m. now. It's like, oh, okay. So they had a solo for Prince, and they're like, all right, we're actually going to, since Prince isn't there, we're going to have Huey Lewis sing it. So I got to talk a little bit about Huey Lewis. First of all, that's like the funniest possible replacement because Huey Lewis is like a bar band singer who like isn't known for his vocal range or musicality especially. He's a charming guy. He's a likable guy, but he's not a Prince at all. And I have a particular soft spot for Huey Lewis. I've always liked him as a singer and his music, but he has Meniere's disease, which is, I was diagnosed this year with Meniere's disease. That's an inner ear disorder. So I always root for Huey Lewis. And I like how much he talks about how he was like, oh my God, I'm filling Prince's shoes. Oh my God, I have this big solo. And he was nervous about it. And then he kind of nails it. He does a pretty good job with it. Another bit that I like is they have Al Jarreau, who I didn't really know outside of this, but apparently he was really drunk when they were recording this. I want the footage of him chugging wine. Who else was drunk? Who else was up to shenanigans?
Yeah, it's not a good look when you're the only one who's drinking.
No, you look worse than everyone. One of the recording engineers described him as being a little over the top in the alcohol section, which is a good way to put it. I like that. We had to hurry and get Al's part while he could still remember what his part was.
I like the editing in this section. And at one point he makes this noise and the subtitles said, Al Jarreau squawks. He's like, wah!
Another highlight from the recording of the solos, Cyndi Lauper, when she was singing it, and she belts more than some of the other people here. She goes like this kind of little vocal riff, which I think works really well, but it's kind of like tense when she's singing it. And they talk about, there's something going on. The recording, it's not right. There's something off. Something's making noise. And it turns out she'd come so decked out in necklaces and bracelets and earrings that they were like rattling as she was singing. And I thought that was pretty funny.
And it didn't occur to her at all. Like, yeah.
Like, you think like you shaking around, jumping around, singing this part with like 17 necklaces on isn't going to cause any problems.
But also, she's like second from the end. So this is like 6 or 7 in the morning.
I know, yeah. That adds to it too.
I like when Huey Lewis says, hey, how about instead of doing the first people in the line 4 times until their piece is perfect, how about we go down the line and everybody gets to say their part once? So that, you know, we get the chance to practice too.
Well said, Huey. But then we get another candidate for the best moment in the movie, which is Bob Dylan trying to figure out how to sing his solo, because he's got a solo to sing, and he starts singing it, and when it's the first time it's his turn to record it, he's like, like he's trying to sing it, and like words are barely coming out of his mouth. It's like he doesn't know how to sing anymore. Like he forgot how to sing.
I can't do it.
Yeah, and he's like, could you? And Quincy's like encouraging him and stuff. And then the resolution, which I thought was very funny, is so Stevie Wonder is a good impressionist. Stevie Wonder, you sing this as if you are Bob Dylan, And then Bob Dylan is going to mimic you singing in the Bob Dylan style, which is just very funny and a tribute to Stevie Wonder, I think. They eventually got it to work. It worked, quote unquote. I think he's like pretty easily the most out of place singer in the song. But yeah. They also had to clear the room so he could sing. He was nervous with everybody floating around. They get Bruce in there, and man, Bruce just sings the hell out of it. He's got like a solo, and then he also has the split screen with Stevie Wonder later in the song. That's terrific. And then they're done. It's like 7 a.m. Everybody's sung their solos. They've done recording it. And this is where we get Diana Ross being emotional about it being over. And she was crying about it. She said, "I don't want this to be over." And what this made me think of, Brian, is, and Andrew, I don't know if you guys ever went to like stay away summer camps, but like a sensation that you're like in this totally different world and it's like really intense. It's probably kind of like the 48 speed or whatever it's called, Brian, too. But like, I remember one summer camp I went to for a week, and as we were leaving, this guy who went to a different school from me, but who I kind of felt like I was close to after you spend like an intense week together. He was like, "Man, if you gave me the option right now between the friends that I've had for years or the friends that I made from this camp that we were at and am never going to see again, I might actually choose to stick with the friends I made this week rather than my normal friends." It's just like how intense the experience was, you know? And I kind of get that. You kind of get the sensation that this was like a special thing that people kind of powered through and like actually left an impression on them.
I unfortunately think neither of us ever experienced that.
Well, I mean, I've done some summer camps in Boy Scouts.
Well, yeah, but that was with people you knew already, right?
Oh, good point. Yeah, I guess that's true. It's people you see at the scout meetings.
And you did band camp, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and you're right. I guess it's people that you know. It's not just Ernest goes to camp situation.
Right.
But I like the description that Lionel gives of going home and his family welcomes him at the door. You know, the sun's up now. It's like 9 a.m. or whatever. And they say, "Oh, congrats on the American Music Awards. All the trophies you got. You were a great host." And he essentially says, What are you talking about? What happened? Because for the last like 12 hours, it's been go, go, go with this We Are the World project.
Right. We also get a quote in there of Quincy Jones saying, "Man, those white boys really brought it," which is just a great line. I want someone to say that about me at some point. And the documentary ends with the global debut of the song, and we get this montage of like people buying records and choirs singing it and stuff. And that is The Greatest Night in Pop from 2024.
Well, there's one other final thing, which is Lionel Richie sitting, I mean, the whole movie's been sitting here, but talking about the fact that he's sitting alone in the studio that had once held all those people. And what does he say, Andrew?
"In however much time, the house will still be here, but the people in the house won't be here."
Right. He allegedly, this is something that his father told him. He said, "Appreciate coming home because you're not always going to be able to go home. The house will still be here, but the people in the house won't be here." And so that on its own is kind of touching. He then says, "Stevie Wonder was over there, and Michael Jackson, he recorded his part right there." And what it had me thinking of, and Andrew said the exact same thing when he met up with us today, was, oh, this is just like the end of the Rockafire Explosion documentary. Because at the end of that, it's robotics engineer Aaron Fector sitting alone in his warehouse that's been abandoned since the 80s, talking about,
In 20 years, someone could pick this tool up and they could make some more cosmetics for animatronics.
right, that it's kind of like a thing frozen in time, that the people have left, but the things are still here. And I half expected him to start playing a keyboard, playing Sal's birthday. Maybe the Stevie Wonder birthday song.
Yeah. And I meant, you brought this up to me, and I sort of see it. First of all, the time period and just the creation and the passage of time and all that. The one thing is, like, Rockafire is kind of talking about how his dream never went anywhere, kind of. I mean, like, it was a flash in a moment, which I guess is kind of the same thing, but then he never really managed to make the dream go anywhere after that. But this is all about, like, the people who are the most successful people of all time in the single room. And so it's a little, and like, it did end up making millions and millions of dollars. So the tone is a little different, but I can see it, I guess.
Yeah. But also that when we went and met Aaron Fechter in person, he literally said the words, "Michael Jackson sat in that chair."
Oh, yeah, you're right. I forgot about that. Wow.
Another cool thing about Huey Lewis is our cousins have a bluegrass band, and they did a cover of Want a New Drug, and Huey Lewis has retweeted that like several times.
Nice.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, he seems like a cool dude. So I thought we could wrap here with just a couple thoughts on the music video, some things we might not have touched upon. First of all, the music video opens with like early CGI globe, like spinning around that, and then it forms the names of all the singers that come out as like signatures, and it's a sign of the times. And then the video itself is just like footage from the actual recording, which I think is the right choice. They didn't like intersperse sad pictures of starving African children. It's much more watchable in the future to just get like a lens on these celebrities and their singing. A couple of highlights. So we get some singers. We get Kenny Rogers in there. Lionel Richie has the first line. And then with the first chorus, Michael Jackson sings it. And this is like one of the greatest shots in cinema history. You have like just showing people singing. And then it does this pan up on Michael Jackson, just wearing this incredible outfit, black fringed with gold, when everybody else is like much more casual looking. And he just like pops off the screen, and he's of course singing beautifully. And that's great.
It is wild how much his voice just transcends.
Right. What are some other highlights here? Anything? I have a couple others.
Well, I like the effect of the superimposition and the way that's used, of the people kind of like Wizard of Oz giant head style, half hovering over the crowd.
Oh yeah, yeah. So when they have the trio, I think it's Cyndi Lauper. I don't remember exactly who it is, but Kim Carnes is supposed to have a solo, but they've kind of reworked it into a harmony. So she does end up getting a solo, but she only has 2 words that she sings solo. She sings "when we," and that's it. And then she goes into a harmony. So I thought that was pretty funny.
I also liked in the documentary how when they get to that part, somebody, like one of the writers or something, just says, "Oh, there should be a harmony there." And Huey Lewis, for one, didn't even know that he was going to have a solo. And now he has to make up a harmony.
Yeah.
And he says, and I have to do it in front of, and he lists all the names of all the people.
So I made a list of my favorites. The ones I got to shout out: Michael Jackson, Cyndi Lauper, Stevie Wonder, Steve Perry from Journey, just really singing his butt off. So good. And then, yeah, I dig Bruce Springsteen. It's a little out of place, but he just gives a good contrast, like a sort of raspy something going on there. Ray Charles gets a few lines in there. He's great.
Yeah, I like that Ray Charles is there. The only one to appear both in We Are the World and the celebrity supergroup cover of the Grover Sesame Street song Monster in the Mirror. Join our Discord.
You'll drop it?
Yeah.
Were y'all aware that Bette Midler was in it? I don't, like, she just in the background. I don't think she's ever front and center in the music video itself.
Yeah, she's in the chorus and you can see her, but only because I've watched this many times over the last week.
The Pointer Sisters are back there too. Lindsey Buckingham is back there from Fleetwood Mac.
Okay, so I just learned from that other podcast you sent me that Lindsey Buckingham is a man.
There you go. Yeah. Any other thoughts on the video? And then maybe we can shout out just a couple other bits of ephemera. I would say go watch it. It's 7 minutes long, and it really doesn't need to be, considering it's the same chorus over and over again. But I've watched it many, many times, and I still get a kick out of watching it.
I've found that I really like watching a documentary about how a thing was made and then watching the thing, because it drives home like how much work goes into a short little thing.
Right.
This is an extreme case of it where all of this 24 hours of grinding and plus a week of songwriting turns into 7 minutes of this thing that is supposed to stand for something in a moment, and will it or won't it last beyond that? Who knows? It's just, it's cool to see a project come together.
Agree, for sure. All right, before we wrap and say, is it good, I did want to mention just a couple of bits of ephemera I've discovered over the years. So one is, and this is the thing that really kind of turned me on to getting excited about We Are the World. And this is a podcast episode from like the mid 2010s or early 2010s on the podcast that was at one point called the Poscast, P-O-S cast. I think it has a different name now, but that's how I knew it. And it's hosted by Joe Posnanski, who's a sports writer. And he would often, I think maybe always, have Michael Schur, who is a comedy writer, best known for creating Parks and Rec and co-creating Brooklyn Nine-Nine and creating The Good Place. And they do fantasy drafts, and sometimes they have guests on. And so they had on a random person, like a former baseball player named Brandon McCarthy, who I don't even think I knew, but he won a World Series, and it seems like he's just kind of a funny guy. And they draft singers in it, and it's very, very funny. They're all funny people. They have some great anecdotes. Like Brandon McCarthy talks about how he sang "Don't Stop Believin'" with Steve Perry after he won the World Series. And Michael Schur gets mad that he can't have Stevie Wonder, so he starts drafting the worst singers instead of the best singers. And it's worth listening to, although you have to, as Brian pointed out to me, you have to get through about 40 minutes of baseball talk in there. There's another documentary, too, that came out around the time, I don't know exactly when it came out, but it came out a while ago. And it's called We Are the World, The Story Behind the Song. And so I found it on DVD with some bonus footage. And I haven't actually pulled it up yet, but I'm excited to see if we get any more clips that weren't in this documentary, or like, I don't know, more talking heads that we didn't get to see.
The sense I got from that earlier documentary was it was probably paired with the music video on a VHS release. Because around this same time, when Michael Jackson did his Thriller music video, they did a VHS release where it was a making of documentary and the music video.
Gotcha.
And I have that, and it's great. I was into it really early on, like early exposure to horror.
Oh, nice.
Is this video of how John Landis made the Thriller music video.
Yeah, I like making of things like that. A couple other things. So I've mentioned a whole bunch of times Tom Brehan is a writer I really like. He writes about a bunch of things, but my favorite column of his is called The Number Ones, where he reviews songs that hit number one on the Billboard charts, which We Are the World did. So he has an article where he talks about it, and it's a good article, although he gives the song the lowest rating he can, a 1 out of 10. He really pans it as a song, although he has some good anecdotes in there talking about the making of it and how it's just kind of a cool thing that exists. And there's a bunch of good, I don't know if I already said this, there's a bunch of good Rolling Stone articles from the magazine Rolling Stone that you can find that it repeats some of what you see in the documentary, but you get a few more details in there and a little bit more honesty about how people felt, which is I appreciated. And the last thing is Mitch Hedberg has a crude joke about We Are the World, where he talks about how sometimes a song already has meaning to the world, but then it gets meaning to you. And there's sort of a tension there, a juxtaposition there. Like he reenacts this scenario where he hears We Are the World and it makes him think of having sex in a pet cemetery with his girlfriend. And it's just kind of absurdist enough to make me laugh when I listen to it. But, so look up Mitch Hedberg, We Are the World joke. Maybe I'll drop it in the Discord at thegoodsfilmpodcast.com.
Andrew, are there any other supergroup songs you would recommend that our listeners check out?
There's certainly some Nick stuff. There's Christmas music with Big Time Rush, Victorious, iCarly, all of them. You should check that out.
I guess that is a supergroup. You played at one point the collab between the Victorious cast and the iCarly cast where they kind of mashed up the theme songs. That was cool.
And Keenan is also there.
We got all the stars.
Yeah.
So that is a super group. I was thinking more of one that was like in tribute to some tragedy. I know on your radio show you had a song for the Grenfell Tower fire.
Yeah. Once again, all British people. Same way with the newest Do They Know It's Christmas? It's all British people.
Oh, tell us a little bit about that. Did they do a new version of that?
Yeah, I think that was the one that was 2014. It's like One Direction right before they broke up. Bono is very much a part of it again.
Maybe we can drop your episode too in the Discord
true.
at thegoodsfilmpodcast.com.
I was listening back to it ahead of this, and there's some nonsense. I mean, it may not appeal to everyone, but I think it will appeal to some.
Isn't that how we feel about our podcast too, Brian?
Yes, that's true.
All right, I think we can rate. So, Is It Good is our signature section where we each give the movie or documentary or music video a rating on our 8-point goodness scale, ranging from very not good, which is a 1 out of 8, to our masterpiece rating, toward a good, which is an 8 out of 8. So
the nonsense section that I'm thinking of is there was an extended discussion about whether poop is a noun or a verb.
And on that note, Brian, is greatest, we'll do the documentary and then we'll do the music video / the song / the overall concept of We Are the World. So is Greatest Night in Pop from 2024 good, Brian?
Okay, well, should we let Andrew start?
Sure. So Andrew, I don't know if you know our 1 out of 8 scale.
Well, I've been subjected to it before, and I'm sure I always go high. Probably always 6 to 8. I would say a 7.
Exceptionally good.
Yeah. I mean,
it's a fun watch.
I've always been a slut for We Are the World, so.
Yeah. Good for you.
Thank you.
Brian, what about you?
It's a high 6 for me. I really find the positivity infectious. It made me like Lionel Richie, and maybe he's pulling the strings to achieve that result. But he seems like a likable dude. Lionel Richie really came on my radar because Rhett and Link on YouTube are both huge Lionel Richie fans, and I think have some of that same positive energy. They did a music video where they covered Lionel Richie's song All Night Long, and they sang the song all night long.
That's pretty funny. All night long, all night long?
Yeah, and I mean, that's a perfect song that also kind of encapsulates this documentary, this story that's about people being up all night long. And what do? They make something. I enjoyed it. I'm glad that you picked this. Where are you at?
I'm going to give it a high very good as well. I really think it could have been a masterpiece of a documentary, like what Annual watching for me. If it hadn't sanded down quite so many edges, if it had a little more bite to it, and also if it didn't spend so long on the build-up. I feel like the fact that almost half the movie is just a build-up to the actual recording, where the recording itself is the much better part. Like when I watched it a second time to prep for this, I was like, all right, get to the actual recording. I want to watch that part again. I still think it's terrific to watch, though, because it's just such a fun story. The footage is so, so good. The characters are so good. And it really was like a really special, just weird moment, but special moment in American culture of like these icons coming together for this bizarre boondoggle of a song. Just extremely charming to watch it come together and watch the recording of it. And I like the talking heads, too. I think people had good things to say. I like the people we got to hear from. I'm going to give this a high very good 6 out of 8.
I could imagine a less polished presentation of this footage being something like Heavy Metal Parking Lot a little bit.
Yeah.
Just like somebody wandering around the recording with a VHS camera.
Yeah, like a verite type thing almost.
That would definitely be interesting too.
That's kind of what I wish this was a little bit more. But I do like what we got. I really enjoy it. So let's talk about the music video itself and the song, I guess, but really the music video, I guess. Andrew, is We Are the World good?
The music video itself,
Yeah, I think the music video, right?
absolutely. Yeah.
The song too, you know, the concept of it.
All of it's fantastic. I mean, probably not as good as Do They Know It's Christmas, but I mean, Do They Know It's Christmas is like a 12 out of 10. Where the World, I guess, is just 10 out of 10.
Is that officially an 8 from you, Andrew?
Yeah.
8 out of 8?
Yeah.
What about you, Brian?
I'm also going to give it an 8 out of 8. Masterpiece. It's such a moment in time. I feel like it's human nature to always call the era that you're living in the end of history. Like, we've learned from all the mistakes of the past, and now we've reached perfection in whatever present we happen to be in. That's the way that humans think and live their lives. But I think especially a lot of people felt that way in the late 80s. I guess this was the mid 80s, but into the 90s, as the Cold War was coming to an end, and then, you know, the Soviet Union fell. I think there was this idea that Western culture could solve all the world's problems, had solved its own, could solve those of others. Maybe it was 9/11 that shattered that idea, but we're definitely not in that place anymore. We're not nearly as high on our own supply these days, and have lost some of that optimism, I think. But here in this bubble of time, we can look back and marvel.
Well said.
We can vibe.
For me, I'm kind of there with you in spirit. It's a special thing. I just can't convince myself to give it the top marks. It's just a little too corny. I don't know. It's a high 7 for me. It's an exceptionally good. I really like, it's that quasi irony thing that I was talking about at the start of this. Is there's just something kind of goofy and cheesy about it. And you know what? There are other goofy, cheesy things I've given a tour to good too, but for whatever reason, I feel like I must hold myself at just the tiniest bit of distance on this, although I do deeply, deeply love it and have watched it 100 times and will watch it 100 times more. So I'm going to go ahead and say it is exceptionally good. That is, We Are the World. And so we did it, Brian. We did it, Andrew. Thank you for joining us. This was fun. I had a really good time. I like to revisit this. This was really a delight to watch and to just enjoy all of the goofiness of this 80s bit of, I would say nostalgia, but I wasn't there, but it's like nostalgia for a time that you weren't around for or something. But just all these stars and stuff. So
Yeah, I'm glad we were able to align all our schedules and get you into the studio, Andrew.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Who would you be, by the way, if you were someone there? Would you be Bob Dylan? Is that how you would feel? Or do you think you would be more of like, maybe more like a Kenny Rogers type?
Yeah, I was going to say I'm between Kenny Rogers and Ray.
Oh,
Yeah.
Ray. Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Well, you do play the piano, so you got that going for you.
I would want to be Steve Perry, but I think really I would ceiling out at like a Huey Lewis. That would kind of be what I would aim for. What about you, Brian?
Oh, it's hard to say. I mean, I feel like so much of it is that at least they aspire to bring a little bit of their identity into like the 4 words that they get that are their own.
Right.
So everybody is like distinctly them, and you can't just be them in the same way as like we could pick what Room character do we want to be or other things like that. But maybe Oates.
Okay.
Oh.
Maybe I would be Oates.
In the background. That's pretty good. And so I think next week, Brian, we have something that's been on the back burner for a while, but we're going to have Gavin back on and we're going to talk about something with him. So it'll be good to have Gavin back on too.
Yes, some more ancient Hebrew history.
That's what we love. So here on The Goods. And with that, everybody, have a good evening. Have a good day. We are the ones who make a better place, so let's start giving, or whatever the line is. I don't even remember what it is.
Brighter day.
Brighter
day. Then better day. we got to practice this thing some more, Dan.
I guess so.
We'll get there. Just look at your sheet music.
Yeah, just stare at it for a bit longer. All right, everybody. Have a good one. Bye.
Good night.
Have a good night. Thank you for having me.